Paddy the Baddy came out talking about Tony Ferguson, and he said it was a lose-lose situation. Now, that is most definitely a phrase I have heard attached to Paddy's position against Tony Ferguson from the day that it was announced. I've heard a number of people say that. It's always bothered me because it's rude. In front of everything, it's tremendously rude. When you have identified that Tony Ferguson is down in the dumps, physically, mentally, a combination of the two, career-wise, whatever it is, but when you have successfully identified that, and then you verbalize it, you're a dick. What would be your point of saying that? Do you think Tony doesn't know? Do you think Tony doesn't know he needs a win? Do you think Tony doesn't know he needs a better showing? Do you think Tony doesn't know he's on the verge of the whole plug being pulled? Like, what is it that you're attempting to achieve by stating something so glaringly obvious? And moreover, when you state it, it is very different than the principle, in this case, Paddy, stating it. Like, as a matter of fact, it's okay when you say it. You made an observation. You would like people to know. You have data to support it. Got 3 fights, 4 fights, 6 fights. And this many on his contract, and I read this on the underground forum. Go right ahead. Go right ahead. But it is very different when Paddy himself says it. And I want to tell you why. It doesn't make it less true. But there is a massive arrogance within the statement as though you're the veteran. And I changed the way I speak about Paddy a while ago. Paddy is not what I thought Paddy was. He's not some brash talking Brit that's going to sell some local tickets and you put him somewhere on the card, never at the main event. He's not those things. First off, he's not all that brash. Secondly, he's not all that great with the quips. I kind of heard he was a little better on the stick than he turned out to be. But third, he has showed me nothing from a physicality that would disqualify him as a potential world champion. I just didn't know he was that good. I do know now. The adversity that he came through with Jared in that fight, to get 2 or 3 judges to say he won the thing, but also to handle it in the aftermath, it was a very veteran move, and it was very savvy. And it was actually Paddy's previous fight that when he was dealing with the death of a loved one. He was dealing with a miserable weight cut. He was dealing with all sorts of hype stuck on the O2. I mean, there was just a lot of things that he overcame and dealt with and performed so incredibly well when I then find out he was not performing all that well. By his own standard of potential, he had more. That wasn't a great night, and he still looked great. So I've just changed the way that I spoke about Paddy, but I do have to at times wonder. I mean, Paddy's saying he doesn't have, that it's a lose-lose against Tony. It's very rude. Now, he's involved with it. He can go ahead and do that if he wants, but I also have internal thoughts that I kept to myself because they were rude. But if we're all just saying out loud what we're thinking inside, what in the hell is it that Paddy's done that makes him a win for Tony? I mean, you talk about Tony's a lose-lose. If I lose to him, I lost to him. If I beat him, I was supposed to beat him. That's the narrative on a lose-lose. Okay, fair enough. What do you think happens to Tony if he beats Paddy? Why don't you answer that question for me? What within all of those matches that Tony wanted so bad, 5 up, 5 down with Khabib, if you want to go back that far, the Charles Oliveira story does not exist without Tony Ferguson. Fight of the nights against guys that have been on the Wheatie box like Anthony Pettis. How far do you want to go back? So what is it that happens for Tony? If it's so goddamn good, what happens to Tony if he beats Paddy? Does he get any of those matches back? Does he get Khabib back? Does he not slip on the court and tear his knee up and cost himself part of his career? Does he get those things back? What is it that you think happens? Do you think Tony should be cut? Do you think Tony's contract, when it expires, should be the end of the line? Okay, great. If he beats Paddy, do you think we should change that? we've seen enough and we have enough evidence, but, this is the rule. Let's just throw him out there and get him a few more fights because, he's got to have 3 in a row. Is that what you think? Are you not mature enough to step forward? What would change? So if it appears that a loss is pretty understandable, I just want to ask you the other side. What is the victory? If he beats Paddy, he's already, and I'm talking about Tony here, he's already the main event, at least for non-title fights. There's nobody on the card higher than him unless they have a championship that they're defending. So where do you want him to go? With those 6 losses, he's still outdrawing and a higher placement than everybody in the card except for the champs. Where do you want him to go? I know what a loss does. I get that. I want you to tell me what a win does. Where does that move Tony? Because if you don't have an answer to that, that's the definition of a lose-lose. And I would be curious what it is Paddy thinks Tony is looking to achieve. Paddy has not fought in a period of time. Now, I've come around. I looked and I saw something special, and I am right. There is a massive potential there. There is a guy that's having problems cutting weight that should affect your conditioning. I believe does affect his condition, and he can still weaponize pace. He'll still go harder than anybody else out there. I don't know how he does it. I've been teammates with guys that spend their time in the practice room burning calories to get the weight off so they can beat the scale. The scale becomes their number one opponent, but as a byproduct, they get in goddamn good shape. Like, I've seen that too. I've seen it both ways, but the definition of a lose-lose. I understand it for Paddy. Sure I do. It's a very rude thing to say against a guy who was supposed to fight Khabib 5 different times, who's had a belt, who's headlined, who's main evented, who's won more performance bonuses than you've had fight. It's a rude thing to say. It doesn't make it an accurate thing to say. Doesn't make it inaccurate at all. I actually understand it from Paddy's standpoint. I don't think he should have brought up. He should have let us. Either way. Go look in the mirror. What does Tony Ferguson get if he beats you? What does he get? Where does he go? Does he get a new contract? Is it shiny and bright? Does he get a new car? Are any of those things, do you think, true? Do you think he gets a higher placement on a card where he's already the thick spot of a pay-per-view, which I believe is a place that Paddy's only found himself one other time? I believe his fight with Jared was a pay-per-view, and I don't believe he's ever been on pay-per-view aside from that. So I'm wondering, what's the win for Ferg? What is so great about it? Where would he go from there? Do you all think he should get a new contract? Do you think he should change weight class? Do you think he should fight for a world championship? Do you think he should get no gyms? Do you think everybody should go train with David Goggins? Like, what is it that you think happens? Does he get more clicks, more views, more fight kicks, more Reeboks, more Ruvkas, more rock shoes? Like, what is it that you think? There has to be a bright side to it, or it, by definition, is a lose-lose. So you say Tony, you say Paddy, rather, is in a lose-lose. Don't you think Tony is too?